dozens of shots.
6-7 Sandy Hook School. Callers indicating she thinks there's someone shooting in the building.
A shot to the heart of the nation.
Our hearts are broken today for the parents and grandparents, sisters and brothers of these little children.
The Sandy Hook shooting, a tragedy that cut so deep, it created an immediate demand for change. For some, a literal call to arms.
We do need the ability to respond with lethal force against lethal force.
For others, a sign those arms need to be taken out of homes and off the streets.
Thank you for joining us for this News 10 special. I'm Trish Glose. Tomorrow, the Vice President is expected to reveal his recommendations to reduce gun violence in America. Now, the debate over gun rights is making this shooting range and others like it a virtual battleground. Throughout this show, we're going to take a closer look at gun control, your rights, and the facts surrounding violence in the U.S. We'll also look at other issues such as services for the mentally ill and how they impact your safety. Also, we're hosting a live web chat right now where you can ask questions and talk about the issues, and that's at ktvl.com if you'd like to join in. Now, tonight is not about emotion. It's not about debate. It's about the facts. So let's start out with a few to put this into perspective. Gun ownership is up here and across the nation. According to factcheck.org, at least 89% of Americans own guns. In Jackson County, there are about 10,400 residents with concealed handgun licenses. That means the proposals discussed in Washington will affect you or someone you know. Tonight, News 10's Katie Connor takes a look at what may be on the table tomorrow.
What started with the Second Amendment is continuing more than 2 centuries later. A discussion about guns, violence, and your rights.
We know that it is there is no silver bullet.
1 week, dozens of White House meetings, all to come up with a plan to keep innocent people from dying. The Vice President's proposals still under wraps. The main ideas, though, out in the open and up for debate. The first point of discussion, knowing who is buying guns.
So far, a surprising recurrence of suggestions that we have universal background checks.
The National Instant Criminal Background Check System went online in 1998. Since then, the FBI reports sellers have run checks on nearly 158 million Americans, about 100,000 of those denied. But experts say many more Americans own guns. Those who are unaccounted for, private buyers who bought their guns from private sellers. Right now, checks are required at stores and gun shows, but there's no legislation concerning online or private sales. A study done for the Police Foundation estimated 40% of firearms are acquired without checks. Still, some buyers aren't convinced. Increasing background checks will help.
Gun control is not a prescription for the evil of human nature. You can't legislate bad intentions out of people.
2 more so-called paper-based suggestions are on the table, a national gun database, and funding more research on data collection on gun violence. That suggestion may face tough opposition. The NRA won a special exemption in President Obama's health care plan to forbid exactly that kind of search. The biggest point of contention, though, a federal ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. The idea, creating a deep divide in Congress.
I do not believe that impeding on people's right to bear arms is the right answer. So no, I do not support the assault weapon ban.
I'm a hunter, believe in Second Amendment rights. But you know what? I don't need an assault weapon to shoot a duck.
The divide even deeper among the American people. Covering your news, Katie Connor, News 10.
Now, both sides of this debate point to the numbers when making their arguments. Now, that supports the saying that a single number cannot tell the whole story. Still, we'd like you to know a breakdown of the facts. Now, according to nonpartisan group factcheck.org, here are the statistics. They show gun-related murders are at the lowest rate since 1981, with 11,078 in 2010. That's about 3.5 people per 100,000. At the same time, non-fatal gun injuries are up at the highest rate since 2008. 55,544 people were shot in 2011. That's the only person-on-person crime category that's seen an increase. Aggravated assaults with guns are down. They've dropped consistently since 2004. That's the same year the federal assault weapons ban expired. Also down since 2004, robberies involving guns. Now, we'll look at all sides of the debate in just a few minutes. First, though, we want to show you exactly which firearms and accessories are at the center of this debate. Here with me now is Ted Brown. Ted, thank you so much for being here tonight. First, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm the vice president of the Medford Rifle and Pistol Club. I'm a retired military intelligence worker, and I also worked as a police officer and a prison counselor. Done a lot of things in my life, but I'm also a shooter and a gunsmith.
Okay, well, Ted, let's talk about the guns here that we have in front of us. What are assault rifles? Show us what they are.
Basically, the one that you hear mostly about in the news these days is the AR-15. This is a cutaway version of it. It's not a working rifle, but this is the type of rifle that you see mostly on the news these days. These are very common. There are millions of them in civilian hands.
Okay.
I can explain too that several of these guns, a lot of these have been converted to use in competition shooting. This is a long-range target rifle. It looks quite a bit different than that rifle right there, and it weighs a lot more.
Oh, well, and if we can, also what's in the news these days, magazines. What's the difference between standard magazines and high-capacity magazines?
The standard magazine for the AR-15 is actually a high-capacity magazine. It's a 20-round magazine or a 30-round magazine, which is a little bit longer. The short magazines that only hold 8 to 10 rounds look like this.
Okay.
And like I say, this is the standard magazine. This is the one that you find most of the time.
Why would people need or want these weapons that we have here on the table?
Basically, they're fun to shoot.
Okay.
They are also a very good defensive weapon if you need personal defense, but they are used more often than not in competition shooting and just general fun recreation shooting.
Okay, all right, and we'll be talking more with Ted a little bit later in the show. Coming up, though, on this News 10 special, we will discuss the pros and cons over gun control and the arguments you'll probably hear that are going to be hammered out in Congress over the next few months. Then a little later in the show, we're going to share some of your comments. And remember, we are hosting a live web chat right now at ktvl.com. Share your thoughts, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our News 10 special on gun control. So far, we've looked at some of the facts surrounding gun ownership and gun violence in the country. Now we're going to get to the heart of this debate with representatives from both sides of the issue giving their take on gun control. According to the Centers for Disease Control, gun violence is the 5th leading cause of death among Americans. It falls behind traffic accidents, overdoses and poisonings, falls and suicides involving guns. Our first question tonight, knowing this, is this even an argument we should be having right now? First to answer, Balder Odinson from Ceasefire, Oregon. He could not join us live tonight, so he gave his take via Skype.
The first thing that we need to do is require a background check for every single gun sale. Not just the sales at gun shows, not just at a licensed firearm dealer. Right now, something along the lines of 40% of guns are purchased through private sales. And here in Oregon, as in most states, you don't need a background check, you don't need ID, you don't need any questions asked at all. It's just cash and carry. So, you know, if a felon wants a gun, all he has to do is answer an ad. He doesn't have to find some shady underworld fence to buy that gun. And something around 35 to 40% of guns used in crimes are purchased that way. Only about 10% are actually stolen, and another 9% or so are received from fences or black market. Now, one argument that the pro-gun folks make is that, well, they're going to find a gun no matter what. Well, it's true, you might potentially be able to find a gun, but requiring a background check makes the seller culpable too. So he becomes a knowing accomplice to that sale. And this also will drive up the costs of these guns. So those two factors combined will make it much harder for a felon or someone who's adjudicated mentally ill to purchase that firearm.
Now joining us again with a different perspective, Ted Brown from the Medford Pistol and Rifle Club. Ted, same question. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we definitely do need more dialogue on the subject. It's really a tragic situation when children are shot and people are murdered and crimes are committed. And firearms are just a small part of that. Over the history of criminal activity in this country, schools have been dynamited, burned down. There's the federal building in Oklahoma City was blown up with a truckload of fertilizer. Guns are just a small part of the problem. And I don't think that the issue is quite as what it's made out to be by the media. We only hear one side of it most of the time, and I think that we need to have more dialogue and look at the complete picture and not just problems with firearms. Criminal activities are rampant. We're releasing people from prison in Grants Pass. It's going on all over the country. These guns really are not the problem.
Okay. Now, everyone agrees there needs to be a discussion about gun rights and gun control. So our next question tonight, what additional regulations, if any, would you like to see put into place as a result of those discussions?
The first thing that we need to do is require a background check for every single gun sale. Not just the sales at gun shows, not just at a licensed firearm dealer. Right now, something along the lines of 40% of guns are purchased through private sales. And here in Oregon, as in most states, you don't need a background check, you don't need ID, you don't need any questions asked at all. It's just cash and carry. So, you know, if a felon wants a gun, all he has to do is answer an ad. He doesn't have to find some shady underworld fence to buy that gun. And something around 35 to 40% of guns used in crimes are purchased that way. Only about 10% are actually stolen, and another 9% or so are received from fences or black market. Now, one argument that the pro-gun folks make is that, well, they're going to find a gun no matter what. Well, it's true, you might potentially be able to find a gun, but requiring a background check makes the seller culpable too. So he becomes a knowing accomplice to that sale. And this also will drive up the costs of these guns. So those two factors combined will make it much harder for a felon or someone who's adjudicated mentally ill to purchase that firearm.
All right, so Ted, what are your thoughts then on restrictions and background checks?
Background checks have been the biggest part of the problem. They've been required for a long time. As a dealer, I'm required to give background checks on every personal firearm sale that I make. At gun shows, it doesn't matter where it's at, whether it's in my place of business or at a local gun show, we always have to do background checks. The big problem is that the states and local law enforcement agencies have not been able to give the federal government, the National Incident Check System, the information that they need to make a determination much of the time on who is eligible to purchase a firearm. And this is a serious problem. That's why a lot of these people that shouldn't have firearms are slipping through the cracks and are able to buy them.
Okay, and just we have a few seconds left here, but is there any harm in instituting those type of controls?
It's going to be really difficult. That's the one thing that the Congress and the ATF can do. And I think that they need to look at that seriously before they start looking at restricting the firearms that law-abiding citizens can possess.
All right, Ted Brown, thank you for being here with us tonight. Now, we do want your take on these issues. We want to hear what you think. Please join our live web chat going on right now at ktvl.com, and we'll be right back with more of this News 10 special. Welcome back to this News 10 special focusing on gun rights and gun control. Another aspect of this debate, guns in schools. The Newtown shooting has put a focus on classrooms and whether no gun zones are the way to go.
15 years ago, a school shooting shockingly close to home.
It's been 15 years since we had the shootings that took place in Thurston High School in Springfield. And then a year later it was Columbine. About 6 years ago we had Virginia Tech, and then a month ago the tragedy in Sandy Hook Elementary back in Connecticut. In Connecticut they already have a ban on assault weapons. They already had lockdown procedures, but 26 people still died.
Oregon Representative Dennis Richardson, like everyone else, looking for ways to end the violence. His solution, allow armed volunteers in classrooms and hallways.
What we can learn from the last 15 years is that doing nothing is not acceptable. Having a gun-free zone so that the only person who is armed on the campus is a mass murderer is not an acceptable amount of protection for our students and their educators.
Richardson's message, sometimes it takes a gun to stop a gun.
We need to ensure that there is the ability to respond with lethal force against lethal force if the circumstances permit.
Richardson is calling for 2 to 3 volunteers in each school, people the students wouldn't know were carrying, and someone other than a police officer.
If we had concealed carry permit holders in the schools, no one would know who they are. When an armed mass murderer comes on campus, he wouldn't be able to go first for the person with the badge and the uniform.
Arming school employees, volunteers, or guards would not require a change in laws. It's legal in both Oregon and California. The only requirement, approval from the school board and citizens willing to help.
I think that it should happen. It should be voluntary, and it should not be required. Nobody's saying arm all the teachers. That would be very dangerous to do. But we do need the ability to respond with lethal force against lethal force.
Ceasefire Oregon taking the opposite approach with a push for new legislation.
We're also trying to remove guns from school. Right now here in Oregon, there is no law against carrying a concealed hidden handgun on school grounds if you have a permit. And to us, that is far too dangerous.
Too dangerous, and according to the group, a move that does not address the real issue.
That doesn't treat the causes, it only treats the symptoms. Instead, we need to keep guns out of the hands of those who would have used them to begin with.
Right now, 18 states allow licensed adults to carry weapons on campus if they have permission. 12 others are looking at similar laws right now. We'll be right back. It's a fact impossible to ignore many suspects in mass shootings and other violent events dealing with mental health issues. Kip Kinkle, the Thurston High School shooter, schizophrenic. James Holmes, the lone suspect in the Colorado Theater shooting, seeing a therapist and disturbed enough to be flagged by his university. Adam Lanza, the Newtown shooter, dealing with his own set of issues so severe his mother was left looking for help for years. Now, while the country goes back and forth over gun control, little is being said about mental health. Some local groups are hoping that changes.
When a person becomes too withdrawn.
Frederick Berger says mental illness is all around us in some shape or form.
All of us have been subject in this time period to a lot of stresses, and none of us can cope with an immense amount of stress without losing some abilities to manage our health.
Berger has been working in the mental health field for decades. In the last 15 years, he's been a clinical social worker. He says treating mental illness is getting easier.
We need to pay attention to each other, is the bottom line here. And whether there is a diagnosed mental illness or not, if there are problems coping with the stresses that we are all experiencing, each of us in our own way, then we need to rely upon each other.
He says the first line of defense is the family. Family members need to pay attention to changes in behavior.
Problems sleeping, problems with diet, problems relating to other people, even with friends and other family members. And so if problems like that are seen, as becoming more frequent, it's time to get an evaluation at a certain point when it's beyond your ability to cope with that.
One issue, Berger says, is the stigma surrounding mental illness. It keeps many from getting help, and Berger says help is out there. You just have to look for it.
We have better treatment now than ever before for mental illnesses, and so people can regain what of their mental health is potentially available now in a way that they could never do before.
Berger says right now the majority of the money set aside for mental health goes to the Oregon State Hospital. He says he'd like to see money go to support mental health housing so people with mental health issues can live in communities rather than a state facility. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more News 10 at 6. Thank you for joining us tonight for a look at the debate over gun control and your rights. Now, we hope you've learned something so you can make an educated decision about your stance. We do want to thank everyone involved tonight, including the Medford Rifle and Pistol Club. Now, as always, we continue this conversation online at KTVL.com and on our News 10 Facebook page. We always want to hear your thoughts on this issue and continuing the debate online. Just like News 10 and share your thoughts. Again, thanks for joining us. Be safe. Have a good night.